It was a freezing December night, just a week before Christmas. My dad and I arrived early at our family's Hamptons house, where we always spend the holidays. This place is usually peaceful during winter, with most of the other houses empty, rich people with their other homes somewhere else. But that night, something about the silence felt different. My mom and sister weren't with us yet. They still had work until the weekend, so it was just me and my dad. He was retired and I was on winter break from school. It was supposed to be a relaxing time, or so we thought. When we got to the house, my dad turned on the heat and checked everything like he always does. I brought my PS3 to play in my room, so most of that first day was just me gaming. Outside, a big snowstorm rolled in, covering everything in thick, clean snow. It was beautiful, but also kind of eerie. The next morning, I went to the kitchen to grab something to eat. My dad was already there, looking out the back window. He turned to me and said, "When did you build that snowman?" I froze, confused. "What snowman?" I asked. He pointed out the window. There it was, a snowman standing in the backyard with 2 sticks for arms and a smile carved into its face. It was staring right at the house. I swore I didn't make it. My dad laughed and said, "Must be the neighbor kids. They probably did it as a joke." I tried to believe that, but something about that snowman made me feel uneasy. That night, I went to bed trying not to think about it. But I woke up around 2 a.m. to a loud thump on my window. It wasn't a normal sound. It was a heavy, solid bang, like someone hitting the glass. My heart was pounding. I pulled the blankets over my head and stayed still, trying to convince myself it was just snow falling off the roof. But after a few minutes, curiosity got the better of me. I peeked out the window and screamed. There was another snowman. It was closer this time, right outside my window. But this one was different. It had an angry frown carved into its face, like it was staring straight at me. I screamed for my dad, and he rushed into the room. When he looked out the window, his face turned serious. "This isn't funny anymore," he said. "I'll talk to the neighbors tomorrow." The next morning, my dad went to the only neighbor's house that had kids, but when he got there, the place was empty. No cars in the driveway, no footprints in the snow. They weren't even in town. For a few days, nothing else happened. I started to think maybe it was just a weird coincidence. But then, on Christmas Eve night, everything got worse. By then, the rest of the family had arrived, my mom, my sister, and even my grandparents. We were all in the living room, getting ready for dinner, when we heard a knock at the front door. It wasn't the doorbell, just a slow, steady knocking. My dad stood up and asked, "Who's there?" A strange, low voice replied, "Please let me in. I need help." We all froze. There were no windows near the door, so we couldn't see who it was. My dad asked again, "What do you need?" The voice said, "I have no one to spend Christmas with. Please let me in." My dad told them to leave or he'd call the police. The voice paused, then said, "Okay, I'll go." When we finally checked outside, there was no one there. Just another snowman standing right by the front door. This one was even taller, with longer, twisted branches for arms. On Christmas morning, we found a note taped to the door. It said, "I just wanted to have fun. I built the snowmen for the boy in the house. I thought we could play together." That was the last time we ever saw the snowmen, but to this day, I can't shake the feeling that whoever did this was watching us, and that they might still be out there. It was Christmas 2016, and my name is Andre. I was 21 at the time, really looking forward to spending the holidays with my family in Miami. What should have been a time of joy turned into a nightmare I'll never forget. My family had gathered at my Uncle Joshua's place in downtown Miami. Coming from Connecticut, the warm weather felt strange, almost wrong for Christmas. It was the Friday night before Christmas Eve, and my younger brother Nico and I decided to hit the town. Miami was buzzing with holiday parties, and we wanted to experience it all. We started at a club on Miami Beach, but the bouncer spotted Nico's fake ID right away. We decided to head to a small bar not far away. It was dimly lit, with cheap Christmas lights that flickered in a way that felt off. The whole place had a weird vibe, the kind of feeling that makes your skin crawl, but we were so excited, we didn't think much of it. That's when she showed up. A woman in her mid-40s walked up to Nico. She wore a faded blue Santa hat and a tight, tattered red sweater. Her smile wasn't warm, it was hungry. I couldn't hear everything she said, but when she mentioned young guys with Hispanic accents, my stomach turned. Something about her felt wrong. Her eyes were too intense, like she was staring right through him, and the way she moved, too graceful for someone her age, made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. But Nico, being young and naive, loved the attention. After a while, he tapped me on the shoulder and said he was leaving with her. I hesitated. I wanted to tell him to stay, that there was something off about her, but he seemed so sure of himself, and I didn't want to ruin his night, so I let him go. That was the last time I saw him that night. About 20 minutes into my Uber ride back to my uncle's place, my phone rang. It was Nico. But when I picked up, all I heard was static. Then I heard it, a low, guttural voice that made my blood run cold. It wasn't Nico. "He can't come to the phone right now," the voice said. In the background, I heard screaming. It was Nico, yelling my name, begging for help. My hands were shaking as I tried to call him back, but when someone finally answered, it wasn't Nico. It was a man with a deep, sinister voice. "I found this phone on the ground," he said, mocking me. I could hear muffled screams in the background, then the call cut off. I was paralyzed with fear. I couldn't think straight. The Uber driver had to pull over because I was hyperventilating. He told me to call the police, and I did immediately. The police arrived at my uncle's house, and I explained everything. We spent hours searching, visiting the bar, and describing the woman to the officers. Then a random number called me. It was Nico, and he sounded out of breath, like he was struggling to stay awake. "Andre," he said, "I escaped." We found him in a dark alley in North Miami. His face was a bloody mess. His eyes were swollen shut, his clothes torn. He was barefoot, shaking, and kept glancing over his shoulder, like he was scared someone was still chasing him. Between gasps, he told us what had happened. The woman had called an Uber, but when the car arrived, it wasn't an Uber at all. 2 men were inside. As soon as he got in, they grabbed him, pressing something cold against his neck. He thought it was a knife. They took everything, his wallet, his phone, his keys, and beat him when he tried to fight back. But it wasn't just a robbery. "They were talking about sacrifice," Nico whispered, his eyes wide with fear. "They said it had to be tonight, under the Christmas moon." He said they were taking him to a remote location, and when they stopped for a moment, he saw his chance and ran. The last thing he heard was the woman's laugh, a low, unnatural cackle that's still ringing in his ears after he escaped. We were just relieved he was alive. But the nightmare didn't end there. On Christmas night, we were jolted awake by Nico's screams. He was in his room, standing by the window, pointing outside. "She's here!" he yelled. "She found me!" We rushed to his room, but there was nothing outside, just darkness. Then I saw it. Written in what looked like blood on the outside of his window were the words, "See you next Christmas."